Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined, as always, by Pat Fitzmaurice and Scott Bogman. Fitz, you are the only healthy one here. I, as you know from doing a couple shows with me this week, am fighting through a cold and a cough. Bogman is fighting through something where he's a bit under the weather as well. So we are the troopers who are showing up ready to rock and roll. This is easy for you. You're just feeling dandy, aren't you?
That's right. Tip top, and just, I know we're remote, but hopefully you guys won't give me anything while we're sitting here talking. No, hopefully you guys feel better. I don't like having sick colleagues. It's no fun.
We recorded another show earlier today, and you mentioned something about maybe flying out with some chicken noodle soup. It's not here yet, so I'm wondering what's going on.
I actually Instacart that, Fitz.
Yeah, no kidding. Our daughter is actually the one who has made some really good homemade chicken soup. So I'll have to get her to go out, or maybe we'll see if we can get a vat sent to you.
I'll be sending my address too. So.
Yes, yeah, perfect. All right, we'll jump into the show here so the sick guys can go rest after this. We are talking some do not draft these players. We are past the kind of we're not past rookie draft season. There are still rookie drafts going on, but we're past that kind of big swell of it right after the NFL draft. So we're now into trading season. We're into startup dynasty season. So consider these kind of both do not draft these guys in your startups, but also maybe you can think of it as maybe don't go out and sell the farm for these guys and you try and buy high on them, or however you want to interpret it. But we are calling it our do not draft players. We've got 15 of them for you here on today's show. Just a quick note for everybody, all of our early 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. From there, you can also navigate to our staff dynasty rankings on the site as well. We're going to go through position by position. There's going to be different number of players per position. It's 15 total, like I said. We're going to start with a couple of quarterbacks here. Fitz, we'll start with you. Who are you not drafting in Dynasty?
Justin Herbert. And I know that will probably aggravate some people because Justin Herbert seems to be some sort of sacred cow in the Dynasty community, but he's averaged under 18 fantasy points per game the last 2 years, putting him outside the top 10 in the points per game category each of those years. Now he's going to play in what's sure to be a run-heavy offense with Jim Harbaugh calling the shots and Greg Roman calling the plays. And even if Ladd McConkey turns out to be as good as we're hoping he's going to be, the Chargers are still likely to have a below-average collection of pass catchers. No more Keenan Allen, no more Austin Eckler, no more Mike Williams. Quentin Johnston was an unmitigated bust last year. Also, Justin Herbert doesn't really provide needle-moving bonus value as a runner. His single-season high in rushing yardage was 305 yards. And his career YPA is 7.1 yards per attempt, which is actually lower than Baker Mayfield's career YPA of 7.2 yards per attempt. And Herbert's actually been under 7.0 each of the last 2 years. I'm not saying Herbert stinks. He's a good NFL quarterback and, super toolsy, and his best years are probably ahead of him. But a lot of people do treat him as a sacred cow, and I just don't know if he deserves it. I'd rather have the guy Bogman is about to talk about, and I'd rather have either Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels in Dynasty than Justin Herbert. And Anthony Richardson by a mile over Justin Herbert.
That's a good tease. Before we get to the guy that we're going to argue about when Bogman says him, I want to follow up on Herbert. Do you think that by virtue of playing in a Greg Roman offense, we will see more rushing? I know it hasn't been part of his game in the past. Do you think that he has it's not going to be like a Lamar Jackson 2019 season, obviously, but do you think that we might see maybe a couple more rushing touchdowns, maybe a couple extra 100 rushing yards on the season?
Possible. Yeah, I don't know how much of that is baked into the Greg Roman offense. Obviously, with Lamar it was, but Lamar might just be a special case because Lamar is probably the best running quarterback of all time.
I'm really interested to see because, obviously, we've Greg Roman with Colin Kaepernick and Greg Roman with Lamar Jackson. We haven't, unless I'm forgetting somebody obvious, we haven't really seen Greg Roman with a pure pocket passer on the level of Herbert. So maybe I as somebody who watched a lot
Herbert
of Ravens,
can run.
I think Herbert can run more than he has. I think he has in him
at Oregon. That's what he did.
He destroyed Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl with his running, not with his passing. It was with his legs.
Yeah. So I'm really curious.
It's in there. It's in there. I'm below ECR as well. I have him at 11. I think his ECR is 9. So I'm a little bit below, but I have him in that same tier. with those other guys. I wouldn't say Richardson by a mile, but I do have Herbert in that tier.
So Fitz, I actually swung a trade in our Dynasty League with the work guys that we've talked about a lot, and I'm not going to bring this up for every player, but with Herbert specifically, I'm curious your opinion on it. I gave away, and it's a Superflex Dynasty, Tua, the 203 this year, and Cortland Sutton to get Herbert. Do you think that was an overpay? Because I was really happy with that. It was actually offered to me, and I was happy to kind of get out of the Tua business and to just kind of hitch my wagon to somebody with the talent of Herbert, and kind of having the idea that Jim Harbaugh is a good enough coach that, like, if the best way to win is Herbert's arm, that they will do that. Do you think that was an overpay based on you having him on your do not draft list?
No, I mean, I think it's a fair deal. Like 203 is, you're not getting a sure thing at 203 in Superflex. And Cortland Sutton, who knows? I mean, he's useful now, but we'll see. Like, it's not like he's got a long career runway. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable deal. We'll see what Tua. I don't know what to make of Tua either. I mean, like, he was terrific early last season and then just faded badly down the stretch.
Tua, like, honestly, if we were ranking the list of players that are most difficult for me to rank in Dynasty, Tua might be at the very top. I really struggle with what to do with him.
There was a stretch, I think it went into like, I don't know, it was the first 10 weeks of the season where he averaged over 20 fantasy points a game. And then down the stretch, it was like 13.9 points per game. I mean, it was just like shutting off the switch. And here's the thing, like the Miami defense is going to be terrible this year. Well, I don't know about terrible, but like they lost a lot of key defenders. So yeah, they're going to be in a lot of shootout scripts potentially.
Well, it's you know, it's on the one hand, it's like he takes one wrong hit and his career might be over.
Yeah.
That's it.
They also haven't backed him up with the contract yet. But on the other hand, like there was a point in October last year where I was thinking about trying to sell him. And I was like, I feel like I need multiple firsts for Tua because he's a 25-year-old who's leading the position in scoring right now. Like it's very difficult for me just given the factors in both directions. He's not actually the player that we're talking about, so that's a bit of a detour there. Let's get to the big fun argument that Fitz alluded to with the pick that Bogman is making here.
Yeah, mine is Jordan Love, and it's less about the player here. And I know Fitz just blinked because he couldn't believe I said that, but I there are good quarterbacks. We just had 4 brand new quarterbacks inserted in that are going to be starters by the end of the year. I would rather have 3 of those guys than Jordan Love. And Jordan Love had a great season first year as a starter, but the Packers went back. They got Josh Jacobs. They added Marshawn Lloyd. They already play with one of the slowest, attempts per game. You know, they run a real slow paced offense. And I think he was so good in the pocket, and they don't have a good backup quarterback. I think this rushing upside for him is going to come off a little more every single year. He doesn't have a contract extension yet. I expect him to get that, or I expect them to franchise him, however it works. They're going to figure it out with Jordan Love. So I'm not so worried about him moving. I am worried about repeatability because we've seen it for only 1 year. And the other pieces of this offense were amazing. Can they repeat as well? And then you have the new run game coming in. So it's not so much about Jordan Love. It's just that there are other good quarterbacks. I still like, the three guys, the 3 rookies. I said Caleb, Daniels, McCarthy. I'd probably take Drake May over him too. Kyler Murray is not that much older than him. I think 8 months, something like that. I think I'd still rather take Kyler with his rushing upside, although he's, shorter stature. So I understand injury risk. I get it if you don't want to take Kyler. I just think there are so many names. I'm just going to wait till the last one of the guys that I like falls, and Jordan Love is going way higher than that. I have him at 16. His ECR is 11 among QBs. I'm not doing it. I'm not investing in a draft for Jordan Love, especially if he's going to go that high. If he falls, I'll take him. I do like him, but I think there are too many other good quarterbacks around there to reach for a guy that's only done it for a year.
So Fitz, I want to clear the paint and let you kind of go to work here on your guy. But first, I want to kind of pose a question. Like, I see the case for, it wasn't really even one season. It was mostly half a season. The first half of last year, he only had 2 finishes higher than QB 12. It was really that second half where he looked stellar. But he looked stellar. I mean, like, he looked legitimately really, really good. It didn't feel fluky. Maybe the, touchdown rate was a little high, but, in terms of just how he looked, like watching him, it didn't look like he was closing his eyes and getting lucky. Like, it looked like he was really like making great plays and playing the position at a very high level. I disagree pretty strongly though with Bogman in those rookies. Like Caleb Williams, yes, I would draft Caleb ahead of Jordan Love. He's that special. Personally, I'm a little lower on Daniels than others just because I'm worried about the late career breakout and mainly the injury thing with Daniels. There's no chance I'm considering McCarthy or May ahead of, and I like both those guys, particularly May, a lot. There's no chance I'm taking them over Love. So having said that, Fitz, I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And honestly, I will not be violently offended by Bogman's points. Like, and I get a lot of it. Like, I don't know if we should categorize Jordan Love as a running quarterback. Like, I think that's sort of the gravy in his game, like a little bit of bonus.
He had it coming in. I just don't think they need him to do it.
Right. Yeah, and they have added, a heavy-duty running back in Josh Jacobs. They do play at sort of a slow pace under Matt LaFleur. That's been the way they operate. But, man, this guy's got a lot of arm talent. And, like I was a Jordan Love skeptic for a long time. When they needed him to make a start in place of Aaron Rodgers when he had COVID a couple of years ago. I mean, he had a terrible game against the Chiefs in Kansas City. So, but obviously, like the long waiting period, like he was ready last year. Like it took him a while to get settled in, but like he was okay early on and then just took off. And I kind of feel like that's what we're going to see. And yeah, you don't know if all of the wide receivers and tight ends, like if they can all repeat their success from last year, but Boggs, they've got so much volume around him now. I mean, they go like
it's
4 or
really
5
good
wide
offense.
receivers. Yeah, Dontavian Wicks, like the 4th receiver, really good. 2 good young tight ends. Bo Melton, who was super efficient last year. He's the number 5.
I love this roster. I really do. And I think I should probably like Jordan Love more. But give me the rushing upside of McCarthy in a heavy passing offense. Give me the rushing upside of Jayden Daniels. Give me even the rushing upside of Trevor Lawrence. They haven't let him do it yet, but I think they're going to need to. Like, just let the dude. He hasn't shown it yet. So, if he's going to be the chosen one like we all thought, let him run. So I just don't think Love has that. So I'm going to take those other guys ahead of him because of those factors. But Jordan Love is a good quarterback, but we have a lot of good quarterbacks too. So, I more take offense that he is going as high as he is. If he's picked 11 sometimes, great. But I think 13, 14, somewhere in that neighborhood is probably more likely for me, and I haven't. So I just won't be drafting.
He's only 2 years older than Jayden Daniels. I mean, he's been around a while, but because he sat so long, but he's only 25. He'll turn 26 during the season. Jayden Daniels is 23. He'll turn 24 during the season. So it's, and even and now he's older than the other rookies. The example using Daniels. Obviously, Love is like 4 years older than McCarthy, but it's not like he's some old veteran who only has a couple years left. Like that arm talent is going to play for a while. Just to quickly kind of, take this point home. If you look at the tiers we have in our expert consensus rankings in terms of dynasty, tier 1, Allen, Mahomes, Hurts. Tier 2, Stroud, Lamar, Burrow, Richardson. No arguments there in terms of those names. You can quibble with the order, but those are the tiers. Then tier 3 is bigger. It's Caleb, Herbert, Kyler, Love, Daniels, Lawrence, Prescott. I think you could argue Caleb should be a tier up. I think you could argue maybe 1 or 2 of those guys could be a tier down, but that feels like the right range for him. I know you mentioned the 2 rookies that you would, take ahead of him, Bogman, but I think those are the right names for him to be kind of listed amongst, right?
Yeah, yes. And I'm not trying to knock Jordan Love. Good quarterback, great in the pocket. But I think a lot of those other guys have rushing upside that he is just not going to have. And why would they run him? They don't need to run him. Michael Pratt is your backup quarterback right now, or Sean Clifford. So you don't need to be putting him in harm's way at all whatsoever. So I just think they take that away.
By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract, and salary cap functionality. and so much more. I think it sounds complicated. It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. We've got a handful of running backs here to talk about next. Bogman, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Zamir White as a guy that I don't really want to draft in a dynasty league right now. And his ECR currently is 27. I have him at 37. Look, Zamir White is fine. He's not impressive. He doesn't have a great elusive rating, doesn't have a great run rating. He did get a heavy volume at the end of the season and put some big games on tape, 22 for 145, 20 for 71, 25 for 112. But the Raiders did add Alexander Madison, who I don't like. They added Dylan Lobby, though, who I do like. So I think Lobby's going to come in and probably take receiving down duties immediately. So I think that turns Zamir more into a 2-down back. I do think he's going to get a heavy workload this season, but if it doesn't work out quickly, then the Raiders are going to be looking for a running back next year as well. So I just think the window for Zamir to grab this job and run with it is pretty small. So I think we're drafting him as a running back 3. I more want him as an RB4 to take a shot on it. I do think he's going to hold some value this year. I just don't know moving forward how much we can trust Zamir White. So I like that he's getting a shot, but I think people are taking it a little bit too far. I know our boy Debro likes him, but he more likes the situation too. He said, look, I talked to him. We went down a big rabbit hole about it for like 20 minutes. And I said, his final synopsis was, look, I don't really like White, but they are going to feed him. That was his overall thought process. I think for this year too, but if he's not impressive, Raiders are just going to be looking for a running back again next year. So I don't know. The window is pretty short. The opportunity's there, but I don't know if I'm buying it.
Yeah, Fitz, we taped a show with Debro earlier this morning, and we talked about Zamir White, and you were much lower on White than he was, and that was thinking, more about redraft. I assume you feel the same. If you feel that way in redraft, you probably feel the same way in Dynasty, right?
Bogman said it. I mean, Zamir White is going to be a 2-down back, and that archetype in Dynasty is not really what I'm chasing, since Dynasty leagues are typically PPR leagues. So, the early down grinder is not really the kind of guy I'm pursuing in Dynasty. And Boggs makes the great point. Like, if it doesn't work out with Zamir, this is his golden opportunity. I did like him as a prospect coming out of Georgia. Like, this dude runs hard, man. He runs with some violence. And, but, if it doesn't work out, what a great opportunity to tease next year's rookie running back class, which looks pretty fantastic with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson and Donovan Edwards and Rocket Sanders, and just the list goes on.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's an exciting class, man. So, yeah, I mean, like, Zamir White does have a golden opportunity here, but yeah, like, I don't want to get out over my skis in a startup draft on a 2-down, early down thumper guy. And that's the kind of archetype I'm going to talk about with my next player.
Yeah, who you got?
It's David Montgomery, the early down non-pass catching grinder. And like, Montgomery's, his ECR is running back 23. And like, I don't find that too offensive. I've got him like running back 25, but I'm probably just drafting around him in a startup. Like, we know Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have a prominent role in Detroit. And I think it's fair to say that he's more explosive than David Montgomery, a better pass catching back than David Montgomery, and probably more talented than David Montgomery. I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. Also, Detroit ran the 3rd most plays from scrimmage in the NFL last season. And that was a big part of the reason why they were able to have 2 really useful fantasy running backs last year. What if they don't run as many plays this year? What if circumstances change? And look, Montgomery turns 27 in less than a month, and we see a lot of running backs start to fade in their late 20s. So he's just not really a guy I'm that interested in startups.
Yeah, looking at the tiers again, I mean, he's in tier 4 in the expert consensus rankings. Quickly, the names in that tier: DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, Ramondre Stevenson, Trey Benson, Joe Mixon, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, Najee Harris. Trey Benson is the only one of those names that I'm like interested in, kind of maybe not aggressively approaching, but like a guy who I'm trying to get in startup drafts. The rest are all like, if you're in win now mode and you're trying to win year one, it's worth considering. That's typically not my strategy in a startup. I'm just not interested in a lot of those guys in that range. Like if that's the range you're in your startup draft, I'm very likely to be looking at wide receiver, tight end, maybe second quarterback if I haven't taken one. Like I'm not really looking at any of those running backs.
And the thing is, where I'm like, Derrick Henry, we talked about him on our show earlier today, where I'm not especially interested in redraft. I just think there's some risk with a 30-year-old high mileage running back. But if you are playing, to win right away, if you're in win now mode, if you're just going to take those discounts in the startup draft on like older proven veterans, like Derrick Henry can land a haymaker for you if it all works out and you get lucky and he, doesn't start to topple over the age cliff. Whereas David Montgomery, what's the upside? Like, maybe he gets 1,000 rushing yards again, 10 touchdowns, like virtually nothing as a pass catcher. Like that would be the optimal scenario for David Montgomery. And I think that's pretty pie in the sky, like maybe a 10% chance he has that sort of outcome.
Don't try and butter me up with kind words about Derrick Henry. After on the earlier show, you were all like against him,
besmirching him. I know.
Yeah, come on. It's the people will see through your tricks here. What do you think about David Montgomery, Bogman?
Yeah, I think Fitz is right. I do have him. I have him at the bottom of the tier, but I have all those guys that you mentioned ahead of him. I think Montgomery could still put up some big numbers, but there is just no doubt that the Lions are going to trend more towards Jahmyr Gibbs because he is a better running back. And that is the thing with running backs. It's like Christian McCaffrey. What has every coach that's ever had Christian McCaffrey told us? Oh, we're going to give him fewer touches. We're not going to overwhelm him. You can't take a guy that talented off the field. That's the same thing that's going to happen with Gibbs. Montgomery had a big chunk of his production come from touchdowns last year. So I don't know. I think the usage is going to go down every year for Montgomery. So he is a bit of a fading star. So I'm only 3 spots below consensus, but I am below consensus on Montgomery as well.
Who's your next guy, Boggs?
Kendre Miller. And by the way, cheap plug here. The reason that I have Kendre Miller in this is because Fitz and I were answering questions on the Fantasy Pros Discord, 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays from now on. We're going to start recording those and putting them up in the feed if I don't screw up the recording like I did on the first one we did. So, those are going to go up. And we had a question about Kendre Miller, and the gentleman talking was saying, he kind of had Kendre Miller as the next man up for sure behind Alvin Kamara. And I'm only a couple spots below ECR on Kendre. His ECR is 39. I have him at 44. I probably have him in the same, range as well as a tier as we do. But my thing with Kendre Miller and pretty much the entirety of the Saints offense that isn't Chris Olave is that I think we're getting a new coaching staff next year, right? I think Dennis Allen is out. I think he probably should have been out this year, but Derek Carr is a bit of a mess. Dennis Allen's a bit of a mess. They've had cap problems for a while. I think after this season, they're going to hit the reset button, and whoever comes in, Kendre Miller's not their guy. Maybe Kendre Miller plays well enough. Maybe Kamara gets hurt. Kendre Miller showcases, right? But again, like I mentioned with Zamir White, it's going to be a short time frame to do this, and you have to do it and look impressive behind Alvin Kamara. And if you don't, they paid Jamal Williams a bunch of money. So Jamal Williams is still here to get carries in New Orleans as well. So I do think Kendre Miller is the immediate guy behind Kamara. I do think there's a chance he becomes the Saints guy, but with the questions about the offense moving forward and the coaching staff, do they want to bring in their own guy? Do they like Kendre Miller? I just don't know where he cements himself. So I'm just a little bit lower on Kendre Miller.
Yeah, Fitz, obviously not a big impact from Miller in year one. What are your thoughts on maybe taking a flyer on him in startup drafts?
There's some people in the Dynasty community who really like him, and to me, Kendre Miller is just a complete mystery box. So I kind of agree with Bogman. I can't see investing in a guy. I'm just not sure. A guy who's a total blank for me. A guy I don't know what to expect from him. Kind of liked him as a prospect, but wasn't over the moon about him. And I don't think we saw enough from him as a rookie to really get any sort of read on him. So I'm just kind of, I don't know, in a startup draft, another guy I'm drafting around.
Now, Fitz, am I reading this outline right? Are you about to start talking negatively about Derrick Henry again?
Yes.
Twice in one day?
I know.
Gosh.
I put Derrick Henry on my list. It's just that I think people are expecting yet more of the same from Derrick Henry. But like, he's 30 now, and he has led the NFL in rushing attempts in 4 of the last 5 seasons. He is a high mileage guy. He actually turns 31 right at the end of the 2024 regular season. And like, we've seen guys like high volume, heavy duty, physical running backs hit the wall much earlier. Like Eddie George was, going on and on like a metronome for a long time.
Can I tell you one thing?
Yeah.
All those guys didn't have in common, Fitz.
Okay.
They weren't Derrick Henry.
I know. He's a unicorn.
I said it earlier on the earlier show when we were talking about redraft that I'm willing to, maybe put more stock into guys who have been outliers their whole career.
Guys are unicorns until they're not.
That's
fair. Zeke Elliott is I think he's 28 now, and we consider him to be a shell of himself. I just worry that when the end comes, it's going to come quickly, and you are going to have an asset that goes from Henry is a well-regarded asset right now. And when he goes, that value is just going to disintegrate. You'll have nothing on your hands. I just worry that could come sooner than later at his age.
Well, to be fair, I want to be clear that I will be probably above consensus on him in redraft, and I'm very excited for what we'll see this year. That does not apply to Dynasty. I am lockstep with you in Dynasty. Philosophically, am I willing to take a risk on an outlier in a redraft league? Sure. Am I willing to take that risk with any kind of significant pick in Dynasty? Absolutely not. There's no way. So I think you made a good point earlier about if you are looking for if you decide based on the way the board falls that you are competing right away, you want to win your Dynasty League in year 1 and can get Henry at a discount, I think that makes sense. I will not be aggressively targeting him in Dynasty anywhere close to as much as I will be in redraft. So there's a very and I think that's probably obvious to most people, but it's just worth saying that to me there's a very clear distinction between the two for a guy like Henry specifically. Bogman, what do you think?
Yeah, I think he just becomes conditional. The further he gets in his career and he doesn't fall off, the bigger the risk is. He's the yodeler from the Price is Right game, right? Eventually, he's going to keep singing and fall off that cliff. I do agree with Fitz. That is going to happen. Mother Nature's undefeated. It'll happen, right? But what I would do if I'm taking Derrick Henry, number one, he has to be my 2 running back, my second running back in a dynasty. And if I do draft him, I'm just making sure I get I get a Jonathan Brooks, I get a Trey Benson or something like that to go with him, so that I have a plan for when he eventually does fall off. So I'm 1 spot ahead of consensus ECR, 21. I think right now his is 22. But he just becomes conditional. That's really what it is for me.
The thing is, he should be one of the most traded guys in Dynasty because he deserves to be on teams franchises that are going all in for 2024. Though right. Derrick Henry needs to be on those teams. And if you're not all in for 2024, if you're rebuilding, retooling, productive struggle, whatever, I'd take Dontavian Wicks in a 3rd rounder for Derrick Henry if I was that sort of team. He has no business being on your team if you're not in win now mode.
It's a great point. I tried to trade for him in our Dynasty League and was rebuffed because the owner is well, I'm trying to contend, so I want to hang on to him. But yeah, it's really pretty binary with him, whether you want him or not. By the way, Fitz, how surprised are you to hear that I don't understand that yodeler reference?
Well, see, I was thinking about that, Worm, but like,
Make me
it's
feel
not
old,
like
Worm.
The Price is Right has been discontinued. Like, it's been on. I mean, maybe it's not the heyday like it was during the Bob Barker years anymore with Drew Carey has been the host.
Well, I'm
right?
aware of The Price is Right as a franchise, but I couldn't tell you what like the games are or
You never stay home sick from
Oh.
school?
Yeah, exactly. You've never faked illness to get out of a day of school before, Worm?
Actually, no. My dad's an
Wow.
English teacher, so school was like you had to be on your deathbed to not go to class. Growing up, I've seen it on in like doctor's office, like waiting rooms and stuff, but I didn't know there was a yodeler. I don't remember that much of it, at least.
Nah,
Yeah.
you'll get a video. I'll send it.
One of the better games, absolutely.
See, and we don't need to go too far down this road, but I thought that it was just like you guess the prices of stuff. I didn't know there were also games.
Well,
Well,
you do, but you have to set what the price is, and the yodeler will move to that price, and it's up on a mountain. And sometimes if you pick too high, he'll go right over the cliff.
Yeah, the games are all built around guessing the prices of items. You know,
They're just different
Turtle
games.
Wax and Rice-A-Roni, the San Francisco treat.
Right.
My main frame of reference for Price is Right is the arc on How I Met Your Mother, where Barney thought Bob Barker was his father. So that's about all I got as far as Price is Right references go. All right, let's move to the next player because nobody cares about that conversation. Bogman, who's the next running back you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Devin Singletary. This isn't that big a surprise. His ECR is 38. I'm at 46, and I feel like I kind of like Singletary for this year. He's had chances, but he's just never really been crazy impressive. He hasn't had 1,000-yard rushing season yet. The downgrade from the Texans last year to the Giants this season is enormous. The nice thing about Singletary for this year is he has a chance to earn that role and stick with it because the other guys on this roster, I mean, backing him up right now, it's Eric Gray and Tyrone Tracy. And I like Tyrone Tracy, but he's kind of a tweener. You're not going to give him the ball 20 times. So Singletary should get the rock this year. But again, you're behind a bad O-line. This team lacks weapons. It's not like it was in Houston last year where CJ Stroud is throwing it deep down the middle all the time and you have these lanes open for you. So I just think he's going to struggle in New York. I think that he's probably, I think what he is right now is what he is. He's an RB4, and I don't have that much more enthusiasm for him outside of this season. I do kind of like him in redraft just because he replaces Barkley. He's going to have a huge workload, but he could easily be replaced next year and no one would bat him.
Yeah, I think the fact that the opportunity is so clear this season is maybe, bumping him up in some people's eyes. I am right here with you. If you are in the back half of your 20s and have proven throughout your career that you're just a guy and you're not even on a very good team, like that's just not the archetype of a running back I'm pursuing heavily in Dynasty, whether via trade or in a startup draft. Like I'm sure there would be a point where it's like, yeah, like it's a reasonable value. But at that point in the draft where he becomes a value, personally, I'm just more likely to say, let me just take a lottery ticket on like a high upside receiver that, has fallen because they haven't done it yet. Like I'm just not going to take a guy like Singletary when he checks all those boxes. And maybe that will, could bite me in a startup theoretically if he does have a really good season here and his value rises and maybe you could trade him next offseason if you think it's going to drop again. But he's just not the guy for me. The final running back we'll talk about in our Do Not Draft section is DeAndre Swift, and I'm saying it because you guys both picked him. So, Bogman, I'll let you go first as to why you picked Swift here.
Yeah, Swift, I just do not believe in. And ZCR is 16. I have him at 30. They paid him. I just don't understand why. He was 56 in run grade, 65th in elusive rating. He's only scored 5 touchdowns in each of the last 3 seasons because he isn't built to score. Last season, he had 14 carries inside the 5 for the Eagles. His previous 3 years with the Lions, he had 19. And I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, if I can choose between monster Roschon Johnson and little DeAndre Swift to score me touchdowns on the Bears, I'm going to give it to the monster. So I think Roschon's going to be the goal line back. I think we're going to be extremely limited in what DeAndre Swift can do in this offense. Now, look, this offense could click immediately and get rolling downhill, and maybe that makes things easy for Swift. He will take advantage if you give him yards. I just don't trust him to create that much, and I see him, kind of in that range of Zamir White. I think he's that type of a back, although Zamir, they're different styles, but they get points because of heavy usage. I just don't think we're getting that from Swift again this year.
For those watching on YouTube, this is my shocked face that Bogman prefers a Texas running back to DeAndre Swift. Fitz, obviously you agree because you also listed Swift for this segment. So what can you tack on to what Bogman said?
The Detroit Lions moved on from DeAndre Swift after 3 years, and in his third year, they cut his workload pretty dramatically. The Philadelphia Eagles moved on from DeAndre Swift after 1 year. He did have back-to-back 100-yard rushing games for them in weeks 2 and 3, then didn't have another one all season. Now the Bears have him, but they also have Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson, so no guarantee that Swift gets some sort of massive workload this year. It's 4 years into DeAndre Swift's career, and no team has been willing to commit to making him a centerpiece of their offense. So RB16 seems like a pretty over-aggressive ECR for him.
Whether you are starting fresh or getting ready for your rookie draft, dive deep into Dynasty Prep with our 2024 Dynasty Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/dynasty. Get access to our expert rankings, rookie draft advice, mock drafts, and much more. You can also join live expert AMAs on our Discord at fantasypros.com/chat. Dominate your Dynasty League with our Dynasty Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/dynasty. All right, let's go to the wide receivers. Fitz, who is the first guy that you are not drafting?
Jayden Reed, just to prove that I'm not a Green Bay homer. He was a very pleasant surprise as a rookie, and he's a good player. As a Packers fan, I'm very glad he's on the team. Here's the thing, though. Jayden Reed played 18 games last season, if you include the playoffs. He had a snap share of 70% or higher in exactly 2 of those 18 games. He is not a full-time player. He won't be on the field when the Packers are in 2 wide receiver sets, where it's going to be some rotation of Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks. Reed will be on the field whenever the Packers go to multi-receiver sets, 3 wide, 4 wide, which will be reasonably often, but the Packers might use 11 personnel more than they did in 2023 this year because Luke Musgrave was hurt for a lot of 2023. Now he's healthy. They have 2 good young tight ends in Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. So also Reed scored 10 touchdowns last year on 75 touches, 64 catches, and 11 carries. That's a touchdown on 13.3% of his touches. And wow. I think we can probably expect some regression in that department. So a 13.3% TD rate, not likely to be equaled or surpassed in 2024. I like Reed. ECR wide receiver 31. That seems a tad rich to me.
Bogman, you're low on Jordan Love. Are you also low on Reed?
Barely. I think I have his ECR is 31. I think I have him at 33. So just a couple spots, but I don't know. There's just a big old mess of wide receivers in here that can kind of be interchangeable. So whoever the one, whatever, I feel like whatever reasoning you have to not take a guy, I think is probably fairly valid because there's so many good wide receivers right now, specifically with this class coming. So yeah, I'm a little low on Reed. I didn't realize the snap share was that low. I knew he scored a bunch of touchdowns, but once again, repeatability for this offense, I do question it a little bit.
Bogman, I don't think I'm going to be happy with your first pick here amongst the wide receivers.
Yeah, look, it's Zay Flowers, and everything I just said about the fact that wide receiver is deep. This is the reasoning that I have for Zay Flowers. For me being low on him, his ECR is 22. I have him at 32. I just want him as a wide receiver 3 instead of a wide receiver 2, and I feel like he's expensive. Let's not forget, Mark Andrews missed 7 games last year, right? I think I'd rather have Worthy, Coleman, Ladd, Brian Thomas all still over Zay Flowers, although I do feel like I like Zay Flowers, but I think that with Derrick Henry, with all of this running, with Mark Andrews back, I mean, I don't think Rashad Bateman's ever going to make a step up, but it's either going to be Rashad Bateman makes a step or they draft a wide receiver high next year. It's going to be one of those two. So I don't know. Off-field stuff I don't like either with Zay. So there's just it's death by 1,000 cuts here for Zay. It's not really one thing that I dislike about his game. He's great with the ball in his hands. They just don't pass the ball a ton. And one of their big targets was out for a big chunk of the season. There's a lot of good wide receivers right now. So for me, I just have Zay a little bit lower in my ECR. Not that I wouldn't take him. He would just have to fall.
I do like Zay. It's not even like a Ravens thing. I just like first round receivers going into their second year when they were good in year one. And it was, I mean, like, no, he wasn't Puka Nacua in year one. He wasn't Justin Jefferson in year one. But that's a good year one historically for a rookie receiver. Going into year two, the fact that they didn't add a receiver this year, like he will be the number one guy in that depth chart for this season. Obviously, like you referenced, Mark Andrews is clearly there. So that, is different than most teams in that the tight end is probably the number one target. But he's going to be the number two target and the number one receiver in that offense. And he's really talented. I don't think the offseason, like the off-the-field stuff, is going to come into play from what I can tell. I mean, you never know. But looking at the guys, I take your point that I might rather have him as like a high-level wide receiver 3 rather than a low-level wide receiver 2. But if you look at the guys in consensus directly behind him, it's Tank Dell coming off an injury. Jordan Addison, I think you make the case there, but he's the number 2 receiver in that offense. Rashee Rice has his own off-field stuff. JSN didn't do much last year. Worthy, a rookie. Pickens, inconsistent. We were struggling to rank him on the earlier show today. So, I think it's a reasonable range for him to be in. I wouldn't. The fact you mentioned those rookies, and I am actually torn on some of those guys because I really liked the rookie class, and I think like the landing spots were actually pretty reasonable for a lot of them. So I go back and forth on whether or not I'd rather have Zay than, let's say, like a late first when it's going to be like a Keon Coleman type pick. I think they're pretty close to even. I think I'd lean Zay just given that we've already seen it for a year, but I think it's a reasonable question.
Yeah, I have. So Jordan Addison is who I have where I have him at 22 and in a different tier. But then I have a 15-man tier of wide receivers because I think all of these guys are very good and have a ton of upside. Zay Flowers is in that, but I just think going into, if they were all in the same class, I would have put Zay at 4 behind those guys, or 5 behind those other 4 wide receivers, then obviously behind Neighbors Harrison too. So he just would have been a little bit lower, and I take that into context in terms of the teams too. Worthy's in a better situation. Coleman could be a 1, right? The Ladd is a little different, but the defense is going to be real bad in LA still. So we could see some late, shootouts for the Chargers here too. So all that in context is why I'm a little lower on Zay, but I do still have him in a tier with all those talented guys. Addison's the only one that you mentioned that I have above him, in terms of a tier.
Fitz, you have Flowers exactly in line with consensus, a wide receiver 22. What do you think about the conversation surrounding the upside of the rookies in terms of whether or not now that we know their landing spots, in terms of whether or not you'd rather have them over Zay?
He'd definitely be behind the big 3, but I think I'd rather have Zay than Worthy right now. Like, because Zay has given us a year where I think we can feel pretty good about what he did, even if, based on, like, Zay was getting a lot of hype right before the start of the season, if you guys remember. And relative to that level of hype, maybe he was a little disappointing, just a smidge off expectations. But then again, Worm, wasn't there a primetime game late in the season where, like, Zay had a 75-yard catch and run touchdown wiped out by some completely terrible call on a holding that wasned a hold?
Yep. I forget which game that was, but it would have been his first touchdown in Baltimore. And he was as a hold. Bummed about it. Of course.
So those numbers would have been a little more sexy had it not been for that egregiously bad call. But so I like him. I'm kind of bullish on him. I don't think he's ever going to be like a heavy volume 100 catch guy, but like I think he could be the 1A or 1B, like in a good wide receiver core.
I wouldn't like put money on him having 100 catches. I wouldn't rule it out though. I mean, I do think they want to throw the ball more now that it's year 2 of the Todd Monken offense. And again, they didn't add any receivers that are going to be a threat to him. Like they extended Rashad Bateman, who has struggled to get on the same page with Lamar in terms of like the deep passing and stuff. I mean, he had 77 receptions last year. He didn't play week 18, so that was minus a game. And that was as a rookie in the first year of an offense, with Lamar still learning the offense and everything like that. So, and also Odell was there, who Lamar, liked to throw to. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, maybe like 85 to 90 catches, over 1,000 yards, and like 6 to 7 touchdowns at least. Like and for a guy of his age, still coming into his own in the league, like I'd be pretty interested in somebody like that. Again, I do take the point that if I'm building a team, especially a wide receiver heavy team, if he's my number 3, I'm feeling really good about that as opposed to my number 2. But I'm still very willing to draft Zay Flowers and buy the hype on him going into year 2. Fitz, let's go to your next receiver.
T. Higgins, who has now been in the league for 4 years, and he's been a very good player, but he has not given us a lights-out season's worth of numbers yet. And obviously part of that is that he's been sharing targets with Ja'Marr Chase for 3 of his 4 years in Cincinnati. So there's optimism that once T. Higgins gets out of Ja'Marr Chase's shadow, bigger numbers will come. But an ECR of wide receiver 21 seems to be assuming an optimal landing spot for T. Higgins when he does leave Cincinnati, someplace where he will be the undisputed number 1 wide receiver on some team with a good QB situation. What if Higgins winds up on a team that already has at least one prolific wide receiver? What if he goes to a team that doesn't have its quarterback situation completely squared away? And oh, by the way, T. Higgins has had like multiple hamstring injuries since entering the NFL, which is slightly worrisome. So quality wide receiver, but it does feel like there's some wish casting going on with his ADP and his ECR. So I don't know. I just feel like he's going to be a poor value in startup drafts.
I'm with you on this one. Similar to for different reasons, but I've traded out of the T. Higgins business in a couple of Dynasty Leagues recently, and I'm kind of happy to do so and let somebody else take on the question marks. The ceiling is very apparent, but I think so is the floor, and I just don't like where you are going to have to draft him. I want more certainty than you're getting with T. Higgins. Bogman, what do you think about T?
T is still really young, and he has 4 years of experience in the NFL already. I have him a little bit higher than ECR. I think that if he goes to a different place, he could easily be the number 1. And I've always kind of thought that with T next to Chase is I don't want to think of him as a 2. I want to think of him as another number 1. And I think he has that skill set. The injuries do bother me. The hamstring stuff and those things do bother me, but he's still so young. Like I said, 25, born in 99, just turned 25 as well in January. So I think there's still a lot of meat on the bone for Higgins. So I'm pretty high on him.
What I would challenge you guys on, though, like if you could put T. Higgins in an optimal landing spot, like right now, where would it be? Like, what would be the comment? Yeah, okay, that's a pretty good one. But I mean, it's just like there aren't many spots where you get the combination of like great quarterback and a place where he would instantly be the wide receiver 1.
Chargers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple spots, and it's not guaranteed. So you can squint and see the issues. No problem. Because let's say he ends up in New York. Now Malik Neighbors is one, right? And is it Daniel Jones at quarterback? Is it a rookie that they draft next year? Is it a veteran that they bring in? Have they fixed the O-line? You know what I mean? So it's not hard to squint and see the multiple avenues for Higgins. I just really like that.
You had me with the Bills and Chargers. You lost me with the Giants.
I was getting
but that's
you
what
were
I'm
making.
saying.
You guys were making me dumb by throwing out like 2 great answers right away. Okay,
I was making your point was like I can see if he goes to the Giants, that's a bad scenario versus the other 2 that were good, right? So that is my it's not tough to squint and see where he goes and he loses value. That is in definitely a possibility as well.
Yeah, I think obviously like Buffalo and LA are 2 really good examples. I think even somewhere like if he went to Detroit, yes, they already have Amon-Ra St. Brown, but there is like an opening for, plays to be made in that offense behind him. And if he's like a very clear number 2, like I wouldn't really want him in say like Houston, where there's like 3 mouths to feed. We know it's a good quarterback, but like it starts to get a little more complicated. If he's a very clear top 2, which is what he has been in Cincinnati, then he's still like playable. But I agree to Fitz's point where, we don't know where he's landing, and that's just another question mark with him.
Yeah, I think New England, Denver, Carolina. Those
have quarterback questions.
They all have quarterback issues, right? Yeah. So, that he could be a number 1 there, but I think I'd rather have him in Cincinnati behind Chase still with Burrow. So
yeah. All right, Bogman, who's your next receiver?
I'm going to go with JSN. Once again, same exact deal as I had with Zay Flowers. I think I have JSN two spots below Zay Flowers. And guess who's in between both of those guys? Jayden Reed, by the way. So look, I know Ryan Grubbs is coming in. He's a local product coming from Washington, where the idea was to get vertical and pass a bunch with those great wide receivers that they had at Washington, right? But McDonald comes over from Baltimore, where they ran the ball. They played good defense. They have Kenneth Walker. They have Zach Charbonnet. And you have a question mark in terms of your quarterback. Geno didn't play as well as he did the year before. They went out and got Sam Howell. All the rumors are they really like him, but the dude turns the ball over like nobody's business, and he gets sacked. So I just don't know what the quarterback scenario is. Lockett is still on this roster. He still led them in targets last year too, by the way. I know everyone's fading Lockett because he's old, but he is not dead. So I think for this year, you have kind of a questionable outlook, because I think the bad OCs like Arthur Smith want to build their team around their system. I think the smart ones build the team around the talent. And I think the talent in Seattle is to run the ball a lot with Walker and Charbonnet. I think that's what they should do. And I think it's what they're going to do under McDonald. So I'm a little lower on JSN than consensus.
Yeah, JSN's really tough for me. And Fitz, I want to get your opinion, because I could not have been higher on him as a draft prospect. I was really, really excited about JSN, given what we had seen from him at Ohio State. You know, I know there was some injury stuff his last season there, but he looked so good the year before his last year that it was really hard for me to look past that. And I feel like it still kind of is hard for me to forget that. But, you know, to Bogman's point, third in the pecking order last year, and possibly still again this year, in an offense that historically is like to run the ball. Like, I mean, with the franchise, at least, like, again, to his point, we don't know with the new OC, but where do you come down on JSN, Fitz? Because I really struggle with him.
So do I. I'm with you, Worm. I was high on him too, and then it was just pretty depressing that, granted, yes, like DK is an excellent receiver. Tyler Lockett, even though he's getting up there in years, still very high-quality receiver, and for JSN to not be able to earn targets at all. And when he did earn targets, they were like average depth of target of like 4 yards. They were these like manufactured little, like, let's get this dude the ball in space and see if he can do anything, and he really didn't. So, yeah, I don't know what to make of him. Still like holding out hope that he could have a breakout. Maybe it's just not every rookie receiver smashes. And it used to be that rookie receivers were considered a bad deal in fantasy football. And then like the paradigm kind of changed and rookie receivers started having really good years. But they're still the ones who don't pop right away, and it takes them 2 or 3 years. Let's hope JSN is one of those guys.
Yeah, I think if we're sitting here next year and it's a similar year to his rookie season and maybe slightly better, but kind of similar questions, then I will be pretty out. But I think I'm interested in another season. Fitz, who is your next receiver?
Oh, it's Brandon Aiyuk. And let me preface this by saying that I love Brandon Aiyuk. This is going to offend a lot of people. Terrific pass catcher, maximum effort player who blocks like an absolute madman. But wide receiver 12 for his ECR, like, he's got that really high ECR and ADP. Everyone wants him in startup drafts, and I just don't get it. Like, Aiyuk has never had a season in which he has averaged more than 6.7 targets per game. That is not a lot. And last year, he finished wide receiver 14 in PPR scoring. And do you realize what it took for Aiyuk just to finish as a high-end wide receiver 2? Insane efficiency. 17.9 yards per catch, 12.8 yards per target, 2.65 yards per route run. I mean, as good as Aiyuk is, those numbers are very unlikely to be repeated in 2024. And a lot of the things I was just saying about T. Higgins apply to Brandon Aiyuk. Like, he may very well be playing somewhere else other than San Francisco next year. It could improve his target outlook. But again, no guarantee that a change of venue puts him somewhere where he's going to be the clear wide receiver 1, or it's possible he winds up playing with a quarterback a lot worse than Brock Purdy.
Let me ask you this real quick, Fitzy. If he got traded to Pittsburgh, like that was a big rumor in the offseason, where would you have him? Where do you have him now, and how far down would he go if he's playing with Russell Wilson or Justin Fields? It would be tremendous, right? It would be a big drop, wouldn't it?
Well, you don't like Roman Wilson because he's playing with Arthur Smith, Boggs. I mean,
Yeah.
and like, Pickens isn't trash either. So that would be like, again, I wonder what the target outlook would look like. Is there a path to 140 targets with him if he's in Pittsburgh this year? I don't know if there is,
Right.
honestly. So I've got him like wide receiver, I think. I want to say like 16.
That's exactly
right
where
now.
I have him. 16.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't think it would be any. I don't know if I'd bump him up with a move to Pittsburgh, honestly.
So Fitz, if so, obviously you think wide receiver 12, like you wouldn't want him as a back end, your wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. If he's your wide receiver 2 and your wide receiver 1 is just any of those guys in the top 10, are you thrilled? Are you okay? Are you a little disappointed? Like, how are you feeling if he's your wide receiver 2?
No, like I think he's terrific. I'd be happy with him as my wide receiver too, but I'm just not willing to go out into a startup draft and pay the Rolex price for Brandon Aiyuk when I don't know if he's going to get that many more than 100 targets this year. And I don't know what the target outlook is going to be in the future.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, again, it's hard because like everybody just consensus loves the player, but the question marks are reasonable. Bogman, who's your last receiver here?
Rashee Rice, and look, I'm just done. I'm not doing it. The old saying, like, let people show you who they are and then believe them. That's what Rashee Rice has done. And look, he was great last year, but all of his greatness still made him on average a wide receiver 3. So I think, we have factored in a little bit for his downfall. He's wide receiver 25. I think he probably would have been closer to bumping up against a wide receiver 1 if he didn't have this off the field nonsense. But I'm just putting him down below a lot of these other talented guys. I think, I would rather have the guys that we talked about before, the Jayden Reed, JSN, Pickens, even Zay Flowers. I expect him to miss a big chunk of this year. And if Worthy, takes a big step early, now where are you? You're second or third fiddle, right? Because everybody's behind Kelsey, and they're going to run the ball with Pacheco a lot. So if Worthy is now the 3, that makes Rice the 4. I don't want any part of that. So I'm just, that coupled with the off-field stuff, I want no part of Rashee Rice. I'm done.
Yeah, let somebody else take on the headache.
Yeah.
Fitz, what do you think?
Well, I mean, even if Rashee Rice was a choir boy, I would have my concerns about him because I think he was prolific out of necessity last year. And it was like a very specific role with this, like the catch and run, get it to him just a few yards past the line of scrimmage and let him do his thing after the catch. He had less than 500 air yards last year, which like that's largely because the Chiefs were so depleted at wide receiver and just had no one that Patrick Mahomes could rely on dependably getting open downfield. Now they've got Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we look back on Rashee Rice's rookie year as the best of his career. Like, he's got a lot more target pressure this year. It's going to be hard for him to earn targets in this offense now.
Just one tight end we're going to talk about here for our 15th player. Fitz, who did you pick?
Oh, it's David Njoku. I mean, of all the seventh-year breakouts we've seen in the NFL, this one probably is my favorite. Njoku finished tight end 6 last year, averaged a career-high 12.6 PPR points per game. The bad news, of course, is that David Njoku's 4 highest yardage totals of 2023 came with Joe Flacco at quarterback for the Browns rather than Deshaun Watson. And Njoku scored 4 of his 6 touchdowns last year with Flacco playing quarterback, even though he only played 6 games with Flacco, including the Browns' lone playoff game. So QB play is an issue, and now that Njoku is starting to get older, he did come into the year into the league young. So even though this is going to be his 8th NFL season, Njoku isn't that old, but it's going to be his age 28 season, so no longer a young man by NFL standards. And it's not that he's outrageously expensive. I think he's like tight end 10 or tight end 11 in ECR.
10.
But I would rather have the guys right behind him in ECR than Njoku. Jake Ferguson, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth, Ben Sinnott, all of whom have lower ECRs. I'd rather have all those guys than Njoku.
Flacco loves tight ends. It's his favorite
does.
thing to do is throw to a tight end. So I agree that you need to take that
That's true.
with some degree of salt.
Todd Heap, baby.
Yeah, well, Todd Heap
There were
is
so many-
actually good. Dennis
was good.
Dennis Pitta was the big one because they were like best friends off
Dennis
the field
Pitta.
too,
And it's
and made a very underrated catch in the Mile High Miracle game, that amazing game in Denver in the 2012 run, which again nobody probably cares about. David Njoku, Bogman.
I remember watching that game with my my boss at a restaurant who was a Broncos fan.
Cool.
It was
Oh.
depressing.
I was
watching that
visiting
game.
family. We were doing like a big board game weekend up with family in New Jersey, and they're like, "Hey, let's all go to a bowling alley." And it was like the second half of that game. I was like, "Do they have TVs there?" And it was one of those alleys where they have TVs like over the pins, so you could kind of watch on a bigger screen. And I was not bowling; I was just watching the game.
Worm,
and
you're so
freaking out.
nice. I'm already adjusting my entire Christmas schedule because the Steelers are playing. So
Ravens
they're-
Ravens are on the road for Christmas for the second straight year. That is
it's so stupid. It's on
a
a
brutal
Wednesday.
beat. I
Just
know.
give us a day.
I don't mind football on Christmas.
it.
I hate the idea that they're doing it on a Wednesday just because it's Christmas. I'm
Right.
so anti that.
I don't like either one of them. I don't like Wednesday football. I don't like Christmas football.
The
I just
Christmas
wanna,
football. I'm
like,
okay with.
relax
I
and do
hate
Christmas.
Wednesday football. It's so terrible. Well, it's early. It's like a 1 p.m. is the first game. I don't know. I don't remember which one is the 1 p.m. game, but it's like
Mine,
for
versus
people
Kansas City.
for people on the West Coast, that's like 10 a.m. Like
Yep.
what? I think it's wild. Anyway, Bogman, David Njoku, what do you think?
For Njoku, I'm like right in consensus. I actually kind of like Njoku. I didn't realize that Flacco boosted his numbers up so high, but I also think that for a long time the Browns just used Njoku the wrong way. They drafted him and Harrison Bryant. Harrison Bryant couldn't block, so they had him go out and run the routes, and Njoku block. He is just so much better than Harrison Bryant. He's a complete tight end, and now that they're letting him catch the ball, I think that that trend continues a little bit. So I'm a little higher on Njoku, but I don't want to be picking out of those tight ends anyway. So I want to get one a little bit earlier than that if I'm doing it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. We'll get out of there on that. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to our Do Not Draft Players. Hopefully we were able to give you some advice in your startup drafts. For Fitz and Bogman, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you again next week.